the 2025 Marzo Z1 e-bike chassis. Okay guys, I have been debating putting this video out. So I personally don't like this fork, and it's super hard to make videos of something you don't like because the Karens just get in the comments, they press thumbs down, they're angry. I don't want to make anyone angry. This fork may be right for you, but just know I don't like this fork. But there's a lot of super insightful information in this fork that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So let me tell you the first thing about this fork. It has a reinforced head crown. A lot of forks, OEM e-bike forks, will come with these and you don't even know. Some of them are wider. Fox 38 can have a wider crown. Some of them are taller. So this one is actually taller. So this is the main fulcrum bending point of the fork if you watch the first video I made on this fork. This thing is pretty heavy. It's 5 pounds, 2 ounces, and I'll put the grams on the screen for the weight weenies. So the first thing you should know about this fork is when you hold it, because of the reinforced head crown right here, it's kind of oblong. So this is my first rodeo on a reinforced 36. I've rode the EXT era V1 and V2.1. Basically that's it. And all three of these forks have this same problem. They have this weird, I'm not sure if it's understeer or oversteer, but they have a weird steering characteristic. They're almost like too stiff. Now this one is exceptionally bad to the point I almost crashed. So the Airspring on this fork is a Fox 36 Rhythm Airspring, but it doesn't feel like a Rhythm. So it possibly has a different dimple in here, and it's like just super linear, like it just goes through the travel. It feels like this fork is optimized for the mid-size bump. So if you're like a trail rider, you're only gonna get to about 50% of the travel, and it feels like that's what this fork is optimized for. Essentially, these 36s from Marzo, you're like replacing the 34, the Z2s. And I say that because they come with this downgraded damper. Now you can drop in a Grip X damper, a Grip 2 or a Grip 1, and I have a video on that. You can go find that if you want. But anyway, let me tell you my riding story because I spent about 3 weeks on this fork trying to convince myself that 36mm stanchions are better, but they're not. So just buy a 38 or you can skip the video. But if you want the full story, let's go. Quick recap on the 2025 Z1 story. So I'm a huge fan of the Fox 36 Rhythm because it's an affordable fork that rides pretty darn good. And this one, the 2025 version, looks extra cool with its M arch and gray stickers. Unfortunately, finding out after riding it for a few weeks, it comes with this rail damper that doesn't perform particularly good on aggressive terrain. If you ride green, light blue trails, this is an excellent damper. If you want to ride enduro on your 2025 Z1, I recommend upgrading the damper to at least the grip damper. Taking my own advice here, I plugged in a 2019 Grip 2 I bought for super cheap. With a 180mm Airspring, I was attempting to basically turn this into an enduro fork. So I have the Shock Wizard plugged into this fork to try to shorten my setup and learning curve on this Franken fork. First jump, I found out immediately, even with the upgraded damper, the Airspring characteristic of this fork is not like the Fox 36 Rhythm. It is a very linear fork, meaning it's super easy to press down into the travel, and it's going to require a whole bunch of tuning and tokens to get it right. I've been on the fence between 36 and 38mm stanchions for a long time, so I'm going to spend the entire month of July, the best riding month in the Pacific Northwest, to try to convince myself that 36mm stanchions are better, because all the laboratory testing says reinforced head crowns are the fulcrum point of forks. So let's put this into the real world test. Immediately turning into a frustrating tuning session, pumping this fork up, releasing pressure and adding tokens, it wasn't a good start. I personally find the Shock Wizard to work best on shocks. I've never had much good results with forks, but I was still plugged in and trying to set it up with the Shock Wizard. Now the Shock Wizard is a pretty awesome device because it can tell you like more high-speed compression, so you know what needing more high-speed compression can feel like. Unfortunately, with forks, I feel like it just sends me on a goose chase. Moving into some chunky terrain on the Z1 with a grip to 180 millimeters of travel, that super linear Airspring, it does feel good in the chunk, like it absorbs it pretty well. And the fork does feel pretty darn stiff, but not a good kind of stiff. So 38 millimeter stanchion forks always feel better in the chunk. Moving on to some blue, smooth flow trails, the jumping characteristic of this fork isn't the best. You want a more progressive, supportive Airspring on smooth, pounding blue flow trails. Now let's make this abundantly clear, if you're a super talented rider, this is completely irrelevant. Sometimes I just do not know when to quit, so this is just basically a long story of me being frustrated. Going to my test track with the Shock Wizard installed and basically going for a tuning session as the Shock Wizard was calling for more tokens. So I put 2 tokens in and continued on riding it. Adding like 20 pounds of pressure and an extra token in this fork, going off a small jump, I'm still blowing through the entire section of the travel. I think this has to do with the characteristic of the Airspring. Basically, where did they put the dimple in the fork? Is it linear or is it progressive? Attempting to use the Shock Wizard in my favorite setting, playful, I was never able to get the right result. So I recommend using a Shock Wiz for shocks and not forks from my experience. Suspension is truly a team sport, so your fork needs to work in harmony with your shock. Installing the DHX with a progressive spring on it, going through a chunky section of trail, I found no benefits from the previous ride on the Sun Tour. And then Marzo put this advertisement out, and it all started to make sense. This is the match for the Marzo Z1, a non-piggyback inline air shock for 120-130 millimeter travel bikes. Continuing on the challenge of riding a 36mm stanchion for the month of July, my friend's like, "You're an idiot, just put a 38 on the bike." And I'm like, no, the laboratory tests say different. So that's my friend in front of me, he's definitely faster. So I like to ride slow and low and pop and play. So I'm definitely pushing my skill limit, my mediocre skill limit, trying to keep up with him. So on this section I pop and basically clip a tree. That's because the steering characteristic of these reinforced head crowns is off in my opinion. So let's watch that clip in slow motion and fully diagnose these overly stiff head crowns understeer issue. I wouldn't know as understeer unless I watched the video. Sometimes it's really hard to diagnose an issue, and by filming it, it can really help. Watching the rest of the footage from that ride, studying the Marzo Z1, I discovered I'm definitely using way too much travel for a 3-foot jump. So another diagnosis is complete. Going for 3 tokens in the Z1 in its 180mm Airspring configuration basically tells you this fork is extremely linear. Watching countless YouTube videos about steering issues and forks. So this is the only 45mm stem I could find on the market that was pretty affordable. It's a Pro Taper, basically the same brand as Manitou. It's the closest stem length that matches the fork's offset. So I was currently riding a 35mm DMR stem. This is kind of a problem solver in case you have a super short steer tube. And I just basically didn't take it off the bike because a lot of times I buy used forks that have super short steer tubes. I'm super glad I took months and months to make this video because I have a lot of good insight for what stem length you should be riding on your bike. So on my Specialized Kenevo, I need a long stem because all the weight of the bike is on the rear wheel. So a 45mm stem definitely helps the issue. It doesn't fix it, it helps the issue. I'm now on a Rocky Mountain altitude, and all the weight of that bike is on the front wheel, so you want a shorter stem. So just figure out where the weight is on your bike, front center, rear center, and then basically choose the stem the opposite of where the weight is. The only true improvement for the Z1 throughout the month of July was putting an Olin's coil on the rear of my bike. So Michael's common sense, my friend over there, was smarter than the laboratory testing. So click this video here to watch the full series on the Z1.